I want you to try a little mental exercise with me. Picture a prison cell.
Okay.
It's the classic movie setup, cold stone floor, damp walls, heavy iron bars. You hear the guards' footsteps fading away, the heavy clank of the lock. Logically, you cannot leave.
Right.
But
Correct.
then, in an instant, the walls just dissolve, the bars vanish, the guards are gone. The door isn't just unlocked, it's off its hinges. But, and here's the kicker, you don't move. You just stay sitting there for 10 years.
It's a terrifying image.
Yeah.
It sounds like a nightmare or maybe some kind of psychological experiment. But for the subject of today's deep dive, that wasn't a dream. It was, for over a decade, her reality.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are tackling a really complex, heavy, but I think surprisingly relatable piece of source material. We're looking at a transcript of a testimony. It's essentially a sermon or a speech given by a woman named Sister Veronica, Ronnie, to her friends.
And we should set the stage. This is not some polished TED Talk with slides and a clicker. This is raw. It's emotional. It was recorded at a Warring Women's Sunday service for a group called Kingdom of God Ministries Media.
Warring Women's Sunday. I mean, that title alone tells you so much about the energy in that room, doesn't it? It implies a battle is happening right there.
Exactly. And in this context, warring usually means spiritual warfare, intense prayer, fighting spiritual enemies. So the atmosphere is charged. The speaker before her introduces Veronica as a jewel of the community, but he also he drops this hint that she's been running from this calling for a long time.
She didn't want the microphone.
She did not.
Which, that usually makes for the most interesting speakers. People who want the mic, they have a sales pitch. People who run from it, they usually have a story. So what's our mission today? We are not just recounting a woman's bad experience at a church. We are trying to understand the architecture of control. We're going to unpack Veronica's decade-long journey inside a corrupt religious organization, how she got to the state of spiritual bankruptcy, and the bizarre sequence of events that finally forced her to stand up.
I think the key insight here, the big takeaway, is all about authority. It's about that specific moment when you realize the person holding the keys to your cage is, well, it's you.
Let's get into that cage then. Veronica titles her talk Shackled Without Shackles, and she starts with a history lesson, referencing the middle passage, the Israelites in Exodus. Literal physical chains.
Right. She uses that historical reality to draw a really sharp contrast. She talks about a conversation with a friend who told her, I couldn't have been a slave back then. I wouldn't let anyone beat on me.
Which a lot of people say, right? It's easy to be brave in retrospect.
It is. We all like to think we'd be the hero. But she just shuts that down. She points out that physical slavery used literal iron and violence. You didn't have a choice. Her experience, though, she calls them spiritual shackles. No chains on her wrists, no laws sentencing her to that church. And yet, she stayed.
That's the core mystery here. She asks herself, why did I stay? And her answer is just so honest it hurts. She says she was too scared to stay and too scared to leave.
And that paralysis is what she calls acquiescence. It's not just agreeing. It's submitting to a reality you know is wrong because the alternative, leaving, it just feels more dangerous. She describes herself as becoming mentally, spiritually, and emotionally bankrupt.
Let's define that term for a second. Spiritual bankruptcy. We talk about financial bankruptcy, right, where you have no assets, too much debt. What does she mean in a spiritual context?
Well, she clarifies. She says sometimes she had money in the bank, but spiritual bankruptcy means your internal resources are just gone.
Yeah.
You have no hope, no agency, no connection to your own moral compass. You're just a shell.
A rich, broken person, I think was her phrase.
Exactly. The external stuff doesn't fix the internal void.
So how does an organization keep someone in that state for 10 years? It's not just, mind control like in a movie. There are mechanics to it. And she details this culture of silence.
The dirty laundry rule.
Right. Don't air your dirty laundry. I think most families have a version of this. What happens here stays here. But in this church, it was weaponized.
To a dangerous degree. Dirty laundry wasn't just, embarrassing stories. It was criminal behavior. It was abuse. Veronica reveals she carried this trauma from her childhood abuse she suffered at age 12 or 13. And when she looked to the church mothers for healing,
what happened?
She was explicitly told, you can't talk about that.
Wow. Which just reinforces the shame. It tells the victim, your pain is an inconvenience to our image.
Precisely. It creates a hierarchy where the institution's reputation is more valuable than an individual's safety. And once you accept that silence about your own past, you start accepting it about the present. Veronica started seeing things in the church that were just objectively wrong.
Not just, oh, I disagree with this sermon.
No, real-time corruption.
She gives us some really vivid examples. Let's talk about the kiss.
It sounds like a soap opera title, but for her, it was a real turning point. She describes walking into a conference room and catching two male elders kissing.
Okay, and we should be clear here. Regardless of anyone's views on relationships, the issue for Veronica was the hypocrisy, the cover-up within this very strict conservative church environment.
Correct. In that specific theological context, that behavior was a serious sin, grounds for removal. So she reported it. She went to the bishop, the highest authority. And the response was?
Nothing.
Nothing. Silence.
That's the gaslighting. You see something with your own eyes, you report it, and the leadership just acts like it didn't happen. It trains you to doubt your own reality.
And it establishes that the rules apply to you, but not to them. And then there was the financial manipulation. This part is fascinating.
The money go-round, this honestly sounded like a magic trick to me. Walk us through how this worked.
So picture it. You're at a big conference. The leadership wants to spur donations. They call up all the pastors and bishops and ask them to publicly give a specific amount, let's say $200.
Okay, so it's a show of leadership. I'm giving, so you should give.
Yep.
Creates social pressure.
That's the idea. So they all line up. They drop their $200. The congregation cheers. But Veronica was working as an executive admin. She walked into the back room later and saw the money being handed back to the bishops.
You're kidding. So the donation was a prop. It was fake.
It was pure theater. No money actually left their pockets. It was designed to guilt the regular members into giving real money while the leaders kept theirs. Veronica actually asked them point blank, how much did you give? They said $200.
But she had just watched them take it back.
Exactly.
And she still stayed. That is the part she keeps hammering home. She witnessed fraud, she witnessed cover-ups, and she stayed. She even tells that story about the woman and the table.
Oh, the cracked table. This is such a potent metaphor. A woman in the church is running around, praising God, shouting about this blessing she received, a new kitchen table, but Veronica looks at it.
And it's cracked.
It's cracked. It's almost like a form of Stockholm Syndrome. They were being fed scraps, literal broken furniture, and conditioned to call it a divine feast.
When you're spiritually bankrupt, I guess even a cracked table can look like a miracle.
But eventually, that cognitive dissonance, that gap between what she saw and what she was told, became too much. Veronica mentions a specific vision, a dream she had, that marked the beginning of the end.
The dream of the worm. Now, dreams are subjective, of course, but in her world, they're messages. What did she see?
She saw a beautiful, shiny red apple, but inside, there was a worm crawling through it.
Classic imagery, the Snow White apple.
And she went to a church mother to interpret it. The interpretation was blunt. The church is the apple. It looks perfect on the outside, shiny, polished, but the core is rotten. It is being eaten from the inside out.
And here's the tragedy of failed leadership again. She tells the elders, she tells the deacons, there is a worm in the apple. She is sounding the alarm, and they
ignored it.
And that is the moment the shackle starts to rust. If God is showing you the rot and the leaders are ignoring the rot, you have to choose. Do I follow the leaders or do I follow the truth?
That brings us to the most dramatic section of the source material. This is where the story shifts from, a drama about corruption to almost a medical thriller. Veronica stops relying on the middlemen and decides to go direct.
This shift in agency is so crucial. She has a son, Ben, and Ben develops a serious medical condition. There's a sequence of events here that essentially forces her to realize her own power.
It starts with something every parent understands: the frustration of the healthcare system. Ben needs blood work. The doctors lose the results.
Not once,
but twice.
Which is just statistically so unlikely. So she has to take him back for a third time. But this time, she changes her approach.
Right. Previously, she would have called the elders to pray, outsourced the spiritual heavy lifting. But the elders hadn't shown up for her. So she says she went indignant to God herself.
Indignant. I love that word choice. It's not begging. It's not please if you have time. It's demanding a seat at the table.
Exactly. She prayed with a level of anger, of desperation. And she claims that God revealed to her that the reason the first two tests were lost was because they contained bad news results she wasn't ready to handle.
This is where we have to tread carefully as observers. Her testimony is that her prayer actually altered the reality of the test.
That is her testimony. She says the third test came back showing exactly what God created: normalcy, contradicting the expected medical outcome. Now, whether you view that as a divine miracle or a massive coincidence, the psychological impact on Veronica is what's key. It proved to her she didn't need the bishop's permission to be heard.
But the story gets even wilder. The vanishing incision. Ben ends up in the hospital. He's bleeding internally. It's a crisis.
It is life or death. She describes this confrontation with a nurse who tries to shut a door on her, and she just pushes through. She calls it that mama bear energy. Ben has surgery. They cut him open to fix the bleed.
Okay, so surgery happens, doctors, scalpels, sutures. It's a physical event. But later, when the doctors go to check on the healing...
They can't find the incision?
What do you mean they can't find it? The scar is gone.
According to her account, the doctors were baffled. They said there is no proof that we ever did surgery. The scar tissue they were worried about causing complications, it just wasn't there.
That is a massive claim.
It is. But look at how she interprets it. She says, I was shackled until you touched my child. When the system failed her son, the elders didn't come, the doctors were pessimistic, she took full spiritual authority. It's that realization that I am capable. Once you realize you have the power to protect your own child, the fear of a corrupt bishop in a shiny suit, it just dissolves.
It's the mama bear instinct overriding the conditioned submission. You can mess with me, but don't mess with my kid.
Exactly.
But, and this is a really important pivot in the transcript, she doesn't paint herself as some perfect hero. She admits that while she was breaking her own shackles, she was accidentally putting new ones on her kids.
This was a very brave admission. Usually in these narratives, the protagonist is the victim who triumphs. Veronica admits to being the villain in her own home sometimes. She talks about generational shackles.
There's one phrase she used that hit me hard. I think a lot of parents have said something similar in the heat of the moment, not realizing the damage. She told her son, "You are just like your father."
Oof. Yeah. And she realized later that wasn't just an observation. It was a curse, a verbal shackle, she calls it. She was projecting her anger at her ex onto her son, defining him by someone else's failures. She emphasizes that parents need to stop speaking negativity over their children.
Because those words become the new prison. You're lazy like your uncle. You've got a bad temper like your grandpa. We label kids, and then they grow into the label.
Exactly. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. She realized she was building the same walls for him that she was trying to tear down for herself.
And then she balances that heavy realization with a lighter but still really serious anecdote, the ghetto mom moment.
I think we both smiled at this part.
I laughed out loud. Her daughter has a friend over, and the friend is wearing, let's just say, a very minimalist skirt.
But was out, I believe was the technical term she used.
Right, and Veronica doesn't sugarcoat it. She tells the girl, go in the room, find something else to put on, and leave that skirt on the bed so I know you didn't take it with you.
And the friend called her ghetto. Veronica's response was, I'm not ghetto, I'm hard because I have to be. And this is the flip side of parenting. Sometimes you have to be the barrier, the bad guy, to protect your children from mistakes they can't undo.
She has this great analogy for those mistakes. She's talking to the youth to Gen Z, college kids, warning them about the traps of the world. She says the devil needs a new marketing team because the tricks are old.
The blue vodka bottle.
Yes. Tell us about the blue bottle.
So she describes finding this blue vodka bottle that belonged to her brother. She thought the glass was beautiful, so she washed it out, peeled off the label, used it as a flower vase. Her point is, the packaging changes. It might be a beautiful blue bottle now, where it was a brown paper bag in her day.
Yeah.
But the contents, the alcohol, the addiction, the ruin, it's all exactly the same.
That's a sticky image. It's just rebranding. The enemy just updates the logo for the modern era.
Precisely. She's warning them that just because something looks aesthetic or fun on social media doesn't mean it isn't the same old cage. The shackle doesn't always look like iron. Sometimes it looks like a party.
Speaking of modern challenges, she touches on a topic that often causes a lot of friction in religious families. Homosexuality. She talks about her niece coming out.
This is a fascinating, really nuanced moment. In many conservative testimonies, this is where you'd expect a hardline rebuke. But Veronica holds to her traditional beliefs. She says she doesn't agree with the lifestyle, but she adamantly rejects the idea of cutting family off. She says, we don't throw people away like trash.
She tells a story about her niece coming to visit, and Veronica insisted that the niece wear a dress to church.
Right, and through a modern secular lens, that might sound controlling. But Veronica frames it as wanting her niece to see herself differently, if only for an hour. But the core message she delivers to her niece is, I love you. She chooses connection over condemnation.
It really connects back to her main theme. If she abandons her niece, she's acting just like that corrupt bishop who ignored her pain. By loving her niece, even while disagreeing with her, she's exercising that direct personal agency she fought so hard to get.
She's breaking the cycle of abandonment, refusing to let dogma destroy her family, which is exactly what happened to her in that church.
So let's zoom out. We've gone from a corrupt church with fake donations to a hospital room with vanishing scars to a mother trying to raise kids without passing down her own trauma. What's the synthesis here?
The summary is really in the title, Shackled Without Shackles. Veronica's journey is about realizing that the strongest prisons are the ones we agree to sit in.
She waited over 10 years for permission to leave a place that had no legal hold on her.
She's waiting for the worm to be acknowledged. She was waiting for an apology. She was waiting for a sign. But the lesson she offers is that you don't wait for the jailer to open the door, especially when there is no jailer. You just stand up and walk out.
That is powerful. It's about recognizing that silence and obedience to a corrupt system is a choice, even when it feels like a requirement.
And that true authority comes from within or from your direct connection to your values, not from an organization that cares more about a cracked table than a broken soul.
Well said. We're coming to the end of this deep dive, but we want to leave you with something to think about today.
Veronica realized she was shackled without shackles because she was conditioned to believe she couldn't survive outside that toxic structure.
So here's the question for you. Where in your own life are you waiting for permission to walk away from something that isn't actually holding you back? Is it a job, a relationship, a habit?
Are you sitting in a cell with the door wide open, waiting for someone to tell you it's okay to leave?
Something to chew on. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.